removing the perspective that we used to have about vocational training in this country is probably the most important thing to do to save the US job.
We are building learning profiles of students and then letting that inform the pedagogy, not the other way around.
One size does not fit all. Everyone has a different life, different expectations, and different ways of learning.
We need to find career happiness to have a better life.
Welcome to Better Careers, Better Lives, a show that features leaders in education, technology, and the skilled trade industries, and how they are making an impact in their respective fields by providing pathways to better careers and better lives. I'm your host, Doug Donovan, founder and CEO of Interplay Learning. On today's show, my guest is Julie Lammers, Senior Vice President of Policy and Advocacy at American Student Assistance, ASA. Julie, thank you. I appreciate you joining me today.
Of course, happy to be here.
So I'm dying to learn more about ASA, right? One of the missions is a path for every student. Mm-hmm. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, sure. So our focus is, we are a national nonprofit, and we focus on helping kids know themselves, know their options, and navigate a path to post-secondary education and career success. Our focus really is to help kids understand at key points in their education and career journey, how to better understand their own personal interests and passions, really to test and try those while they're in high school through work-based and experiential learning. And then when they get to the end of high school, really help them navigate to whatever is next, whether it's post-secondary education, a career and training path, or directly into the job market. So really trying to help kids understand what all the key inputs are to make them think more critically about what happens after high school. So we're not in the cycle that we currently are, where kids sort of go to post-secondary education because they think it's what they should do, and it's the next natural step, but it isn't something that's really deliberately thought out based on their own interests and aptitudes and passions.
Got it. Well, I mean, you made it sound so simple, but it can't be that simple.
It's
Tell
not,
me,
no.
how you're reaching these kids. What are the models?
A few different ways. Our key focus is really on kids from 6th through 12th grade. And so we have a variety of different ways we're attempting to reach them. Primarily, we're trying to reach them directly. Particularly kids in high school. We have had great success in reaching them through social media and through videos,
so
platforms.
Not even through the guidance counselors. You're sort of going around all of that and trying to get to the kids direct.
So we do have some programs that we have worked with over the years that have gone directly to schools. It's given the teachers time, resources, and everything that's happening in a school day. We were just hitting a lot of barriers to try to navigate in-school systems. And so we found, particularly during the pandemic, one of the best ways we could reach kids was going directly to them. Okay. And so last year, for example, we reached over 11 million kids through TikTok. Wow. Just by providing them small informational videos about things they might want to think about when they're looking towards making a career decision. And then they move on to the next thing, but it is where they are. We know we can reach them where they are, they naturally want to be, instead of forcing this information on them. Are there other ways to get them the resources that they need?
And how do you, TikTok is often one way, right? How do you measure that you're having the impact?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've built a platform called Futurescape that allows them to sort of put in a little bit more information about themselves and helps them navigate that career journey. If I like, X, Y, and Z, these are the careers that it might be an option for them. It's an interesting tool that asks them a few questions up front based on their RIASAC score. I think it's 5 or 6 different questions. Okay. And then it will come back with a variety of different career options for them. That's much more interactive than doing a typical sit down. I'm going to take a 180 question
personality exam. Exactly. Right. I'm nervous.
Right. And so that's one way that we get a little information on them. We do try to reach out to the kids that have engaged with the platform to get a lot of feedback from them. We're doing constant research with Gen Z to understand what their interests might be.
So walk me through that. So I'm a Gen Zer. I find you on TikTok. I take a quiz. Yep. It says, geez, I like working with my hands. It might be skilled trades, obviously near and dear to our heart.
Sure, yeah.
And they say, geez, I'd like to learn more. Where do they go next?
Yeah, so we are in the process of sort of building out what the next steps are. Right now, it's just a lot of information about what the opportunities are. What we ideally would like to see is working with partners and with others to try to figure out, what is that next step? Can they experience an internship? Can they understand more what a pre-apprenticeship might be, or actually, go out and begin to do an apprenticeship? We just sort of launched this program a few years ago, and we are in the process of building out the next deeper leveling outcomes that we would like to see.
Yeah, of what you can do with that. We've seen the last 5 years, COVID certainly accelerated some of this, just questioning, the post-secondary de facto, you just go to college.
Yep.
How are you guys supporting that? Do you still push towards some post-secondary?
Yeah.
Are you also saying, maybe you can go right for an employer and do earn, learn, apprenticeship, like you have all of that?
Yeah, so the digital piece is one aspect of what we do. We have done work directly in schools because, as you know, a lot digital resources can't necessarily reach middle school students.
Yeah.
So we have done some work directly in middle school, building out the career exploration piece and trying to get kids to think more deliberately about the things they might be interested in.
Even as early as middle school, so sixth grade.
Yeah, that is critical because we've seen research that has shown that middle school is really the point where kids start foreclosing options. So if they don't necessarily see themselves in a career, they think it's just not possible, and there's nothing I'm going to do in high school to get me to that point. So middle school is really a critical piece in ensuring that kids are not foreclosing options, but actually opening up a broader array of possibilities.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So they work backwards. They quickly, discount all of these paths.
I don't know someone that's in that career, so it's not something that's an option, or I've never had a conversation about what that could be, so it's not for me.
And those typically are with the schools because it's a little, you're not going to use the
It is.
B2C approach as much there, is that right?
That's true, but it could be schools, it could be community-based organizations. Boys and Girls Clubs, YMCAs are doing a great job at helping with career exploration and career readiness increasingly. And so it really is the same philosophy of, it might not be digital direct, but it is how do we meet kids where they are in any possible sort of avenue in their lives, that it doesn't necessarily just have to be through the schools, although the schools are an excellent partner in making sure that this happens. But we have to hit them in multiple areas so that when they are ready to make these decisions, there's a network of folks in their lives that can help on this path.
Have you seen any, I know it's a young program, have you seen any shifts? Like, if it was 10 years old, you might say, we had a lot of inquiries about healthcare, 7 years ago, and post-COVID, people are saying, no, I don't want to, that looked rough on the nurses, I want to do something else. I mean, have you seen any shifts?
Yeah, so I think increasingly, when we started this, we are not seeing a lot of career exploration activities happening in the middle school years. We are seeing an increased demand for it. Obviously, because of COVID, teachers are feeling particular pressure there's just not a lot of time in the day to incorporate these things in. But we have been very successful working with partners like the Association of Middle Level Education and others to try to train teachers to embed this more, not as standalone activities, but something you think about on a regular basis. How do you include bits and pieces of this learning in everything that you're already doing? Don't reinvent the curriculum, but just think more deliberately about how you talk about careers and in everything that you do.
Do you get any pushback, right? Sometimes, there's the purists, education for education, problem solving, critical thinking. We don't want them thinking about money earning.
We certainly do, but I think increasingly as you get into the high school space, where we have seen a huge increase in interest around work-based learning, that work-based learning and thinking and conversations about career is a really important way to engage students. So in a time when students feel particularly disengaged from a classroom environment, how can you make it relevant for the things that they have probably experienced over the last year in either having to pick up an extra job or just understanding now what their parents do every day, that they're home doing school at home and seeing their parents working online.
Listening, interrupting their conference calls,
exactly.
all those
those things that we're all experiencing. They have their perception of the working world has changed, but it also makes work-based learning is an incredible tool in making classroom learning relevant.
Yeah, I mean, let's dig in a little on that. Like work-based learning, what does that look like? Give me a couple examples.
Yeah, so we, as I said earlier, our focus really is on, as I mentioned, the career exploration and middle school piece, work-based learning in high school. So work-based learning piece really is trying to figure out ways that we can get kids to be able to test and try what they might like while in high school. This could be job shadowing, interviewing an employer. In its ideal state, it's an actual job experience, right? It's an internship, preferably a paid internship, a pre-apprenticeship program, something like that, on the job experience. And I think what we believe is critical is not only opportunities to help kids understand and build career skills, but to build a workplace identity. What kinds of things do I like to do? How do we help kids build social capital? Have I had a chance to meet people in the workplace that can help me build my network? We know how critically important social networks are in getting jobs. And so all of those things can then be taken back to what they're learning in school, make it a little bit more relevant, maybe more interesting. Why it is I need to know this math, it's because I learned last week how important it is to budget or whatever it might be, and really help kids contextualize what they're doing. Increasingly, those experiences are becoming more important in the high school space. Typically, we waited until college to allow kids to have those opportunities. In our view, it is so critical for kids to be able to test those experiences and not only figure out what they like, but figure out what they don't. As higher education gets more and more expensive, it is an incredible risk for many kids to go to higher education and fail. And so how do you move that risk back a few years into the high school space so that they are testing and trying things without having to pay tuition to do it? They're deciding that I actually really don't like marketing or whatever it might be.
Yeah, don't say that. We're surrounded by marketing people.
No, sorry. Marketing while they're in high school, and so they're not going to spend their first semester of freshman year in classes that are not relevant to them. All of those experiments should be happening much earlier, and we have built a system that has pushed it off and said that's really the realm of post-secondary education and career training, rather than helping kids understand their personal identity and build that while they're in high school.
That's fascinating. And do you, on the work-based learning, is part of what ASA is doing is trying to facilitate that, trying to talk to employers, and is that after school?
So some places it happens after school. Sometimes it happens, a lot of it happens increasingly in the summer. But there are many school districts that are trying to work it within the school day, which is complicated and a challenge for employers to navigate. Which is why it is increasingly a challenge to do. But so we have funded an expansion of an internship program in the state of Rhode Island that allows high school juniors in Rhode Island to participate in a paid work-based learning experience in the summer. We are trying to facilitate work-based learning experiences sort of throughout the country and test and try what the best approaches might be in order to get kids these kinds of experiences.
You also use the term experiential learning. I don't know if you're using those as one and the same, or is that slightly different?
Sometimes it's different. Sometimes it's just a matter of a entrepreneurial experience might not necessarily be on site at an employer, but it might help kids build the same work-based skills by experimenting with how do I create a business. So those are I would believe equally important. Increasingly, those entrepreneurial skills are the ones that kids want, because I think this generation in particular is very interested in doing it themselves, rather than going to sit in a workplace that they're going to be told what to do. And so having those skills, understanding how to use those skills in an appropriate business setting are important things to lean in on.
Interesting. And do you see, be really interesting, obviously accessibility is something you focus on. I think I read 53% of your users, at least on Futurescape, were in households that had below the median income and national average. I mean, tell me a little bit about that and what kind of impact that's made on that community. Yeah,
so we, in building Futurescape, intentionally built it on mobile devices, to be optimized for mobile devices, because I think the stat is about 94% of teenagers have a mobile device, even if they don't have access to home internet. And so it is built on that platform to ensure that we can reach everyone. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we are trying to do is then we partner with others in high-need communities to make sure that we are reaching kids at multiple touch points, whether it's ensuring we're increasing mentorships in a particular community. We have a partnership with the Big Sisters of Greater Boston or the National Mentoring Organization, really trying to figure out what are the other services that we can supplement to the digital to make sure that kids are getting everything that they need.
Have you seen any, again, maybe it's too early, particularly in high schools, that the 4-year path was, let's call it 60% out of a high school. Have you seen any changes in that? Is that increasing? Is that decreasing? Are people being more open about, geez, there's a lot of ways I don't have to go post-secondary classic?
Yeah, I don't think we're there yet. Okay. I think not only from our work that it's very new, but I think that there's still a lot of stigma around not going to a 2 or 4 year school, which I think we're trying to figure out how do we change that narrative a little bit. I think there are pressures from school systems and parents and others that are still forcing that to be what is expected of kids. I don't think we're there yet.
So we face that, right?
Yeah, of course.
Obviously we serve the skilled trades, and we're finding employers are more successful these days taking a 19-year-old who really has an appetite to be an electrician or a plumber, et cetera, and providing a pretty solid education in an earn-learn model. Yeah. And we keep hearing that we're trying to fight, where the narrative switching, that people are really more accepting of this. Is that real or is it anecdotal?
So it's funny. So we are in the process of doing a lot of research with JFF, Jobs for the Future, on this exact issue. And so we did do some research of Gen Z as well as employers about their current perceptions of taking an education that was a non-2 or 4 year path. From the student perspective, what we saw was they are less aware of what the options are, first of all, right? They can't necessarily differentiate between a certificate, a certification, a boot camp. They don't necessarily know what all of the vernacular is. Employers are a little more aware of the options, but both of them still believe that there is an inherent risk with both of those things. So from the employer side, they tend to see that there is a risk associated with picking the wrong candidate, and I don't know. I don't inherently understand the value of this credential, and so I'm going to default to what I do know, which is a 2 and 4 year diploma. From the student side, they are still feeling a lot of pressure from their parents, and the risk of making the wrong choice is too high in their minds to try something new, unless they know someone in their school, a friend, that has gone that path and can well articulate why it is a good choice.
So that model, they need that model. They need to see somebody went to the local union hall and became is on an apprenticeship for a building operator.
And I think that it is also how do you take that conversation out of just the trades, right?
Sure, yeah.
It's
not just the
trades. That
trades.
It's not just the trades. That this can and probably should be the way everyone thinks about their post-secondary education and career trajectory. What is it that I really need to get to the endpoint that I desire? And the problem is that most kids haven't thought about that endpoint very clearly. When research we did a number of years ago showed that the decision-making path for kids when they're choosing even traditional 4-year schools is they pick the school, then they pick their major, and then they decide what career they want to have. And that is completely flipped from where we think it should be if we're going to keep kids from overborrowing, from changing majors multiple times, from finding out 3 years in I'm actually at the wrong school to do what it is I want to do. Right? And it has exacerbated a debt problem for many other reasons. One of many reasons the debt problem is where it is. But this indecision and the fact that we're using post-secondary education as the key point to test and try all of the things that I might like is a great option if you have unlimited resources. But when we want to make sure that kids are economically successful with the education that they have taken on, it needs a little bit more deliberate attention. And we're not saying that it could very well be that is a 4-year degree. But is it a well thought out decision? Is it the right school? Is it the right major? What is it you want to get from that? we talk quite a bit about, at post-secondary education pathways and the work we're doing with JFF, but it is, what is the ultimate path to success? Can and should be many things. It can't just be the 4-year degree as an endpoint.
Do you ever look at the European model's a little different, right? They start in middle school pretty regularly. I mean, that's been a model for them. I've always got pushback when we talk about that, like, oh, Americans will never go for that, right? We want more optionality throughout our, those years.
Yeah, I think the American system has been built to include a lot more. This is a personal choice. This is a personal decision. I am not going to be pigeonholed at 14 into that I'm now going to be a welder because I might just like to work with my hands. I think what we are trying to say is, yes, but you need to know welding is an option. It could be one of many. Yeah. And if you like to work with your hands, here are the 18 things.
Here's a career map of all these potential.
And when kids have, not only feel like they have control over that, but have purpose in what they're trying to do and purpose for what they're working for in school, we see much higher results.
Interesting. When you say purpose, you also talked about endpoint.
Yep.
Is endpoint, is it financial? Oh, geez, how much money could I make? Is it, are kids these days, more focused on, like I want a path of development where I can really...
So it's a lot of things, and that's the challenge, right? We want kids when they come out of education and career to be economically secure, right? And that they have not put themselves in a position that they are going to just take a job because it's what's next, but they can actually take a good career that they love. And so I think, it is really trying to figure out how do you get kids on thinking more deliberately at an earlier age on how they navigate that path through middle school, high school, and post-secondary education.
Is there any institutional pushback? You talked about parents, right? Because sometimes they're hung up on a certain path. But sometimes I think about high schools are sometimes judged by what percentage of the students went to a 4-year institution. Yep. And are you getting any pushback at the institutions?
There's an increased understanding that they want I think they've always wanted their kids to be successful. I'm not saying but as I agree that there are a lot of schools that have certain benchmarks that counselors need to reach, but the number of kids getting into 4-year school, I think what we're seeing increasingly is what they define as college or post-secondary education is changing, right? So it is just as successful a metric for a guidance counselor to say, yes, I have this, student that's going to an apprenticeship program, as someone, I've got these 4 students that are going to a more traditional college. Those metrics are changing. How we define post-secondary education is the understanding of that is broadening, and I think that's what we need to ensure that the number of kids that are entering high school every year can get through a post-secondary education path, because
whatever that is,
we cannot be naive in this idealistic vision that every kid is entering high school is getting to the finish line when it comes to college. Right. It is really only about 30% of kids, right? So what is happening to the other 70%? How can we make sure that they are getting the education that they need and that they really want, right? Because clearly they're saying, this is not the path for me. So how are we ensuring that they have another path to follow?
And I like the redefinition of post-secondary education, because certainly I think the world has gone in the direction of lifelong learning more than it ever has been before, because the access to lifelong learning is one of the major reasons. But even when I was on doing some research for this conversation, I saw the term post-secondary education, and I saw career readiness, and I saw all these paths, and I said, but wait a minute, it sounds like they're still they're still promoting the same traditional path, but you all are defining it differently.
Yeah, I think we're defining it differently, and I think what we are seeing is, I was talking to a colleague the other day who was talking about the fact we're going to live to be 100. There is not one endpoint for our education to stop, and so how do you think more deliberately about not having post-secondary education be the goal, but the career that is going to come after it and all of the things that you want to do in your life after it? What does that path look like? And the type of education that you're taking is one step on that path to get there. Defining that differently will be important.
Got it. And if I live to 100, I plan on retiring at 88 or 89.
Exactly.
So,
but you'll probably take
yes,
some other
I wanna
education
have-
training
along
between
the
now and
way.
then, right?
I might become a nurse in my late
You
70s.
never know. You never know.
Yeah, it could do all directions. Well, great. This has been fantastic. At Interplay, we anchor around the mission, better careers, better lives. And it drives us to show up every day and do what we do. And when you guys think about ASA, better careers, better lives, it sounds like, we're really rowing in the same direction.
Absolutely. Yeah, it definitely. I think what we have, we want kids to be happy and healthy in their careers, because it is driven by their passion. And it is a passion that they have been able to discover earlier on, that they have been able to test and try and really hone, where do I fit in this world, right? And then on the back end, and then what will the world pay me for? There is that intersection that we like to see of what does the world need?
Yeah.
What am I good at? Where are my strengths? What will the world pay me for, right? So all of those things lead to happier, healthier kids, and career fulfillment is certainly a piece of that.
And probably a more functioning world.
Exactly, we would hope.
Yeah. Well,
That's
thank
the
you,
ideal
Julie.
state, at least.
Exactly. Thank you,
Thank
Julie.
you.
Really
Thanks.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Better careers, better lives.